Welcome everyone to a very special video. Today I'm going to be trying to qualify for the literal biggest StarCraft 2 tournament ever, the $1 million Esports World Cup in August. Now, there's only going to be one European qualifier. There are going to be 3 slots. It will be single elimination. We need to win 4 series and we're in. We need to lose just 1 and we're out. Let's begin. The first series of the day is against a Russian Protoss player called I'm So Useless. Now, there's a little bit of a funny story to this, but first I want to say I did stream these on Twitch, and I honestly forgot to turn off the chat on screen. So I mean, it wasn't intentional, but maybe it's going to add a little bit of drama and suspense to it, seeing everyone react to all my failures and my successes. Now, what's funny about my opponent here is that my opponent, I clicked on the profile, it was a 2900 MMR Platinum Protoss player, but it seemed a little bit suspicious because he is in a pro clan, and throughout this game, he's going to play very, very well. And it turns out, I think I learned this after the entire series was over, even though it was quite obvious from game number 1, that this guy, apparently, he just mentally imploded and he left like 1 million ladder games, and his actual MMR is 5200. Now, in this first game, you're going to see a bit later on that maybe we underestimated him a little bit, because I did see that he was 3000 MMR, but he clearly wasn't, right? He was 5200, which is about mid-grandmaster, mid-low grandmaster on the European server. Now, this qualifier was really extremely stacked. Every single round was going to be difficult. Very often when I play an ESL Open Cup, for example, you'll see me play against like an actual Platinum player in round 1. Maybe I get lucky and get a Masters player in round 2, and then it really starts ramping up. But in this really big qualifier, we're going to start out by playing against the mid-grandmaster Protoss already, so that is clearly very difficult. Now, TVP has been my worst matchup, but I did practice it a lot. I even got a little bit of coaching from Skillis. He looked at one of my replays. Skillis is a pro Protoss player, about 6700 MMR or so, so very, very strong. And I got some decent ideas for builds. The hardest part for me was that I didn't find strategies that are necessarily my jam that also worked very well. Whenever I tried to do something that was really 100% my style, it just didn't really end up being that strong. So I kind of had to do build orders that were not exactly in my comfort zone, but I did manage to figure out a couple that were really good. I did get a couple of really fun Cyclone attack builds. I even started incorporating things like Liberators in my early game gameplay, which is very unusual for TVP. Actually got inspired a little bit by Clem there, the current best Terran in Europe. I saw him play against Goblin, one of my other pro Protoss friends, and he built a Liberator. It actually seemed pretty strong, and more than that, it also seemed pretty annoying and fun to play with. So those things are obviously all very important to me. You guys know I do put a lot of effort in annoying my opponents as much as possible. Now, as you guys might tell from the story about my opponent, I didn't really know anything about him. I saw someone type in my chat. I do read the chat. This was kind of a mistake by me, probably, but even if I'm not commentating, I'm not doing live commentary here. There's obviously a voiceover, right? I was not doing live commentary during the match. I still like reading the Twitch chat, so I got a little bit distracted sometimes. But I saw someone say that this could be Naji, who I guess is a more known Protoss player, but I actually had no idea. Later, after the series, this is a really annoying trick, by the way. Look at this. You can actually bug the probe there, so you literally can't see it with the watchtower. Luckily for me, I had Reaper grenades, so I could get it out. But this is apparently Astra, who is a Russian Protoss player name that I actually know. Now, this is a move that I have been practicing that I did actually like a lot. Check this out. So you move the Cyclone to the low ground, and then you jump up with the Reaper. So if they have a unit chilling up here, you can lock onto the unit, and otherwise you can go for this pylon over here. Now, this is a bit of a questionable move. I decided to target the probe there so he wouldn't be able to get the wall off fully. And this is actually going to work out really nice. I really think this is a super cool move. Now, sadly for me, he had a recall available. If he didn't, we probably realistically kill like 7 probes there, and it's really good. Here he has a battery, so it's only going to be 1 probe for us. But we did block his gateway, probably his warp gate. I'm not 100% sure about this, but probably his warp gate research as well, and his blink upgrade. So that is actually a pretty good start here. So now, as I mentioned before, I'm going to go for that Liberator. This Liberator is going to be extremely valuable. Whenever you play against any aggressive Protoss opening, it's actually a really big tip I can give you guys, regardless of what harassment units to build. If you have any kind of harassment unit, so Widowmine drop or a Hellion drop, Banshee, Raven, Liberator, really doesn't matter. It is super useful to have something like that on the other side of the map as a consistent threat if you're going to get attacked. So if your opponent's going to attack you with Blink Stalkers or a Colossus push, it really doesn't matter. As long as you have a little bit of threat in their base, either they're not going to be able to pay attention to it and lose a lot of work as well, they're attacking you, or they're going to be forced to keep units at home, making their attack a lot weaker. So this is actually a very big deal. If you're a Terran player that struggles with attacks a lot, you are going to want to try that. Either keep like a Widow Mine drop or a Liberator there. It is just very annoying. So notice I'm not going to keep it siege there. What I'm going to do is I'm going to siege it in the corner, so I can't even F2 it back. I want it to be... That's really nice about the Liberator, by the way. You can actually just do that. I siege it in the dead airspace, so I won't be able to F2 it back, and that's going to be a very consistent threat that I can use later on. I know myself, guys. I have a bit of a weakness that I am sometimes a little bit of an F2 demon, so I'm just going to play to my weaknesses here and try not to mess that up. Now, I'm making a decent amount of SimCity here because I thought, there's no third base here. I thought this was going to be a blink attack here. I got a little scared because I realized this was going to be a charge attack. This is an extremely strong all-in that I wasn't quite prepared for. I saw that he had a lot of extra gateways with my scouts, but I still thought that it was going to be a blink attack. And here, this is what I was talking about, but maybe underestimating my opponent a little bit because of the MMR, is that this charge timing hit freaking hard, and I only have 5 Marines against 5 Zealots with probably 6 more to come. Now, there is one thing you need to avoid at all costs when you're in this situation, and that is to lose your last remaining ball of Marines. If you ever lose these Marines, you're not going to be able to get back up. I decided to target the Prism there, so he wouldn't be able to drop on top of the tank. And I still have my little Marine ball alive, and this is super, super important. Now, sadly, I couldn't quite reach the Warp Prism, so the Warp Prism is going to get another Warp in off. So what I'm going to do here is, because I shaved off most of his push, I'm going to pull my SCVs and try to get in here fast. Now, the Warp Prism is still sieged or phased or whatever we want to call it, so I was able to snipe it down. Going to hold position in my SCVs so the Zealots can't get through, and it looks like we are barely going to be able to survive. But it's really hard to say that we're even in a good spot there. This, by the way, this is the exact moment when I realized that he was quote-unquote smurfing in the qualifier, because that Stalker micro with the kiting was too clean. I know that a Protoss or Platinum Protoss player would never be able to pull off that micro, even if it looks very simple, so this is what I was sure that he was smurfing. Now, it feels extremely weird, I just want to say someone is smurfing in a tournament, because technically... Well, unless it's like a league-restricted tournament, of course. You can't really smurf in a tournament because everyone's allowed to play. But I feel like him showing up with 2,900 MMR while being 5,200 is probably as close as you can get to smurfing in a tournament. But I think we might have figured it out in time. Like, this is a best of 3 after all, so even if we lose this game, you know, we are still going to be able to play the rest of the best of 3 with the knowledge that our opponent's actually not 2.9k. Now, charge all-ins are usually quite committed. And keep in mind that our Liberator denied the mining in his main base throughout pretty much all of that, which means that our economy is probably very similar. I would have to guess that his was just slightly better, but then at the same time he was stuck on charge tech, right? Like, he doesn't actually have blink, or at least I imagine he doesn't have blink, because most of the time when you do charge all-ins, you actually cut out of gas entirely. Definitely something I should have scouted for before, by the way. So I feel like if we just get our stim up, we already have stim. If we get combat shield, concussor shells, we just play very, very passive. We should be able to either defend the next attack or go for our own attack. I had a couple situations on the ladder where someone did this build. They would transition and our economy would be bad. But then the stress is going to be on them because they would have to defend against a strong push while lacking tech. Like, he's never going to get Colossus. He's probably never going to get Storm. And as you can see, he's going to try to go for the attack one more time. But now I have the advantage that I have a big stim ball and I have enough units that I can basically stand on the ramp and make sure he has absolutely no surface area to attack with the Zealots. As you can notice, I'm staying very, very peacefully back on top of the ramp. I also have 2 Widowmine seats in my main base in case he goes there with the Warp Prism. If you look at the mini-map, it looks like he's about to attack. I saw him posturing there one more time. This Liberator, by the way, like I said, the consistent threat, so much value. He's going to try to drop on top of the tank, but I target the Prism, and now I have that beautiful position on top of the ramp that I was talking about. He's going to lose every single unit, and it means we should be able to counterattack and win the game. The Liberator probably has 15 kills already, and that is going to be game number 1. The second game on this best of 3 is going to be on Ocean board. Now, at this point, I actually felt a lot more comfortable because here You can see actually someone write it in the chat there. He's no beginner. He's played in many different tournaments. I didn't know that exactly, but it was quite obvious that this guy was a significantly better player than his MMR showed. And that actually makes me a bit more comfortable in a way, just because I know what to expect, right? Like, it's just extremely weird going up against someone who's 3K, who's clearly really good, but you don't even know how good. Like, it could have been 4K or 6K. I had no idea. But after that last game, I was pretty well aware of his skill. Now, I even feel like I could read his strengths pretty well in that last game, because I noticed that his macro and multitasking was not necessarily the best. Like, he took a lot of damage from that Liberator. I think I saw that Liberator have 13 kills towards the end there. And he also never really kept a couple Stalkers at home to deal with it. But at the same time, his micro with the charge attack, especially the Stalkers in the charge attack, was actually very good. So I feel like he's definitely going to be a micro player. And for that reason, I want to play a little aggressive with a double gas as well. Now, if you guys are wondering what the logic behind that is that I always feel like if you play aggressive yourself, you kind of keep control of the game a little bit better, if that makes sense. Like, if you're going to play passive and just let everything happen to you, then they can really execute whatever build they want completely freely, whether it's like an absurdly greedy build or just an absurdly crazy cheese. Like, imagine if he was going for a Proxy Gate right now. Proxy Reaper is actually really good against Proxy Gate, for example, just because they're not going to have any units at home. You can wall off your base, meaning that they have to recall their proxy, which is obviously not what you want to do, right? Now, this was the first surprising moment for me. You can already tell he's probably going to be aggressive here, because that Nexus should have been down. I believe we haven't even been probe scouted this game. So at this point, I actually thought this was... I wasn't 100% sure. First, my instinct told me it was going to be a proxy gate. But then I realized he did have a pylon on the low ground here, which means he most likely would need 3 pylons to even go for a proxy gate, which obviously doesn't seem quite right. Now, I see it there. Actually, I don't think I realized it right away, but now I'm watching this again for the commentary. I noticed that he did have 2 gateways there already. I'm going to scout them in a little bit, but this is a 2-gate opener. Now, I'm quite good with the Reaper, so maybe we can get some more damage done. Looks like we are going to get a significant amount of workers. My Proxy Reapers recently, they haven't quite been as effective as they used to be. I feel like I always get a lot of damage done with them, but these days I don't really get a lot. So this one, it felt good. This was a bit of a morale boost for me. Getting a couple workers, getting a really nice scout, and that is just perfect. Now, my opponent still doesn't have a base. Keep in mind, I went Proxy Reaper into a factory with a reactor. My base is still faster than his. So economically, I don't really have anything to worry about. He has 3 Reapers over here. I think they shaded just a little bit too late to kill this. The Reaper should only take only 1 out of 3 hits from those adepts. You need 3 adepts to one-shot a Reaper. And I think keeping this alive... This is kind of an underestimated part of Terran gameplay. You always, kind of like what I mentioned before, right, against the aggressive attacks, you always want harassment on the other side of the map. You also always want to keep 1 Reaper or 1 Hellion or something like that alive if you can, because this Reaper is going to help me scout. For example, here I know he made more Stalkers instead of more Adepts. I know if there's a 3rd base coming, I might even scout Tech on accident. Like, it's genuinely a very big deal. Now I'm going to be able to get into the main base, I believe, as well, and we're going to scout the Tech. And all of this just because I kept this freaking Reaper alive, which is really, really nice. Now, this game, I decided to play Cyclones. Cyclones, not a unit I'm normally a fan of when spammed. The build I did in game number 1, I actually really liked that. Like, a couple Reapers, 1 Cyclone, try to get some damage on, that's nice. But if you make too many of them, it feels a little bit questionable at times, but when you go up against 3 Adepts and a Zealot, then all of a sudden the Cyclones are quite good, so I decided to go for a bunch of them, and I'm gonna accompany them with a Medevac so I can do some harassment. Like, this is really just the best way to play against aggressive Protoss players, in my opinion. Just keep being aggressive, believe in your own skills, you know. Of course, you do need to train those skills. Like, if you're gonna go straight into a ladder game, you might not have the same aggressive skills as I do, but you need to train them, and I think this is a really good way to play here. Now, I did slightly regret going for the fast third command center. It is still a relatively safe build with the Cyclones, but especially after the build he did last game, it didn't really seem like the best idea to me. Now, that was really good unit positioning by my opponent there. I had an idea where I could attack with these 4 Cyclones at the front, and then I could send my Medevac back up against the wall, or against the edge of the map, I should say. This is a tactic that I used a lot. I remember back when I won the IEM, is I would always fake retreat. retreat. I would send the medevac back in a clearly, kind of going back home path, like diagonally towards my base. And then I would send it back in across the edge of the map, and that would work out very, very often. Now, I did see an observer there go towards my base. I saw it now that I'm observing this video. But I'm pretty sure I also saw it in the actual game. So I did know that he was probably going to go for like some fast robo-bait kind of play. That is the most logical. Now, I was kind of surprised to see him shade on top of these Cyclones with the Adepts, because Cyclones are actually pretty good against Adepts here. And I feel like so far this game is going extremely well. What he did is he sacrificed his economy. He knew he was going to lose probes to these Cyclones, and instead he tried to catch the other Cyclone instead of coming home to defend. If you're wondering why a mid-Grandmaster Protoss can struggle against this so much, is because he banked all of his effort on actually catching those Cyclones. And I didn't check the replay on this, but based on how slow these units were to return, it seems like he even waited to try and trap my Cyclones one more time. Like, possibly up a ramp somewhere, which means that I came back just in time with these Cyclones. Now, I do need to be really careful. As you can see, Cyclones die incredibly fast to Stalkers. Like, if you haven't made Cyclones against Stalkers before, trust me, they die incredibly freaking fast. Like, they're actually made out of paper these days. Now, this Cyclone drop is going absolutely ham. And I'm quite happy with this because, in general, my Cyclone drops recently have been doing a lot of work. I played one warm-up game against Terran before this match today, and I think I got a 29 kill Cyclone drop against a Terran when I was behind. So the Cyclone drops definitely seems to be a little bit my jam. Now here I'm going to be trying to do a little bit of micro against the Stalker. You can always pick up the Stalker as the projectile was about to shoot. There I noticed he was locked onto the medevac, and we kill another Stalker right there. Like, I feel like this Cyclone drop has done it freaking all for me. Someone in chat says that Cyclone has 14 kills. I didn't think it was that much, but that's very impressive, right? Like, that is very, very good. The guy says, can we go GG Ree? I mean, I don't think this game is completely over yet, but it definitely looks very good for me. Like, one thing I've lost against in the past a decent amount is sometimes my follow-ups to those builds are not necessarily the cleanest, which means that if they go for either a charge attack or a Colossus attack, those are kind of things you need a really good unit count against. Like, you can't necessarily micro your way out of them. I guess in some way you can, because I did micro my way out against that Chargelin in the first game, but this is actually quite offensive, by the way. I see someone say maybe he is really platinum. Well, this guy is actually a 5200 player with a clearly exploded mentality because he name changed himself to I'm so useless, so I really hope he doesn't read that comment. But here you can see he doesn't actually have this much unit. This follow by me was actually very, very clean, and this is something that I was very happy with. Like, honestly, this game was way better than game number 1, and it was also way better than any game I've played in practice recently. Like I've been talking about, I do struggle against Protoss players a lot. And yeah, this was just so much better than I could have wished for. I mean, at the time, I found out after this game that my opponent was 5200, but even without knowing that, he was clearly a high-level player, so I was quite happy with that. At this point, he really didn't want to leave this game, as you could see, so it was getting a little weird. I typed XD there. I didn't actually type it to my opponent because that would be bad-mannered, but I always like interacting with my chat a little bit. I'm also gonna, troll them a little bit later, you're gonna see, but at this point, I think he is about to leave the game. He's still trying to make a couple buildings, and I guess this is pretty well in line with what his user ID is. Called himself I'm so useless and left a million game to lose 200 MMR. That is not a good sign of a good mentality. I go for a sun scan there. That is slightly bad matter. Just trying to make him know this game is over, my friend. Let's move on. And we win the first series. The next match is going to be against Strange. Let's do it. And this series is going to be incredibly difficult because Strange is a 6.4k Protoss player. Now, we peaked ourselves at 6.5k MMR. My main account is actually 6.5k MMR right now. So this should be a very 50-50 match, but honestly, I was incredibly scared because... yeah, I mean, I've talked about it a lot, but it's still important, so I'm going to mention it again. TVP is my worst matchup, and going up against the high MMR Protoss like this is very scary. I actually had, like, on one hand, I did win 2 games against MaxPax, who is a 7k Protoss player, but I also had games where I get absolutely freaking destroyed by 5.5k Protoss players, so I was scared, but I did learn a lot. And I'm not gonna lie, guys, normally I don't really stream these qualifiers. I kind of just take it easy and do it off stream and stuff. But just seeing like all of you guys in the chat and supporting me and, kind of living with my failures and successes and stuff, it actually gave me a lot of motivation. Like, I don't know, I was reading the chat during the game, which once again might have not been the smartest move. But I really felt a bigger desire to win than I usually would. Like, sometimes in tournaments, you guys have complained about this in the past, and you guys are right, especially when I was still a pro, is that sometimes I give up pretty fast, right? Like, I kind of see a matchup that's really hard, and as soon as it starts going wrong, I tend to give up. But in this one, I really was feeling a little more motivated. Like, I really wanted to do it not just for me, but for all of us. So that was really cool. Now, this series started off pretty nicely for me just because of this. I know it's a very small detail, but we didn't get probe scouted, so I was able to play reactive first. Normally, you don't want to play reactive first because that means the probe can stick around for 50 seconds longer and see exactly what you're gonna do. If you have an expansion on the low ground, he can deny it forever, or you're gonna have to put or pull more and more SCVs, but not being able or not being probe scouted, so you're able to build the reactor, it's super nice. Because I think the builds, they're just better if you go reactor first. Like, you just get your Reapers faster. Like, if you make one Reaper and then a reactor, takes the same time as making a reactor and then 2 Reapers. Like, I know it costs a little bit of more money, but you just straight up have an extra Reaper, right? So that's pretty nice. So what I was planning to do this game is actually go for the build I did in game number 1 of the last series, but with an extra Reaper. So first of all, the first time I tried that build, it was supposed to be with 2 Reapers. In the last game, you saw a different, or 2 games ago, you saw a different version already where I went for 3 Reapers. But since I was allowed to play reactor first, I can actually do it with freaking 4 Reapers. So that is really, really cool. Now, I invented a build that... It's not necessarily groundbreaking. I've invented better stuff than that, but I did invent a build at some point that I really liked for the macro TVP. So a typical game against Protoss kind of looks like you will go for a 1-1-1, Barracks Factory Starport, then you add either 2 more barracks or a 3rd command center, and then you kind of get into the macro game from there. You usually get 1 engineering bay. But what I decided to do was I went for 2 barracks and 1 factory, and then I added a 3rd command center. So your 3rd is like a little bit faster than it normally would be, but you're also not as greedy as straight up playing fast 3 command centers. And then instead of going 1 engineering bay before, you just get double upgrades after. So the economy is really good and you still end up having good upgrades, but you just don't get them as fast. Now here you go, 4 Reapers and a Cyclone. And this is what I really like about this. This is gonna die so fast and is gonna give us a really good scout. So you can tell he's going for Phoenixes. You can actually see the animation there. And then I'm just gonna do some micro here with the Cyclone, just jumping up and down, trying to get lock-ons with my Cyclone, try to not lose a Reaper. I think I might, yeah, I did lose 1 Reaper, but I killed an Adept as well at the same time. Now, sadly for me, he did actually have a battery there, and my units can't actually kill anything under a battery. Like, I know you might think, wait, why didn't you stick around? You were doing so well. My units would not kill a single thing under the battery. In fact, if that 1 Phoenix he got out before I depowered the pylon lifted my Cyclone, that Cyclone would have died to 1 Stalker because none of my units would be able to kill the Stalker under the battery. Though, theoretically, thinking about it now, I potentially could have tried to commit with the Cyclone on top of the battery and then run the Reapers into the main. Though I do know Strange actually likes to make batteries in both mineral lines, so I think objectively I made the right decision, but maybe against another Protoss that could have been a cool play, running them into the main. Now I'm doing something slightly different than what I was explaining before, right? Instead of going for the 3rd command center, I actually went for a 3rd barracks. And the reason I'm doing that is because I scouted the Stargate. I feel like Stargate play is really good against a couple things. I feel like if you're going to play passive, the Phoenix will just kill a bunch of your SCVs over time, over and over, and you can't do much against it. Which is, once again, not the biggest deal, but I think if you've played StarCraft a decent amount before, you know this feeling where you have a build, and if your build gets disturbed, even if it's like, let's say someone trades 5 Adepts for 6 SCVs. That doesn't sound bad on paper, but your economy is so much worse that your entire build feels ruined and you're just out of your element, right? So even having Phoenixes kill a bunch of SCVs feels kind of bad, and then they're also really good against harassment stuff. So what I decided to do was just go for a straight-up push before the Colossus are out. I know that Strange is a really big fan of playing Phoenix Colossus, or not Phoenix Colossus necessarily. I actually know him more straight up as the Colossus guy. I know that he very often doesn't even go for a Twilight or a Stargate. I know he will just straight up go for a Robo and then Colossus. But here we went for the Stargate first, so that's going to give us opportunity to push. And look at this, guys. I still have the Reapers alive, so I can jump the Reapers up here, even if I have no air unit, and just shoot down all the buildings that are on top of there. Now, one thing I am probably a little bit too afraid of a play against Protoss, but it also makes sense, is that I don't like pushing at the front too much, because if you don't have an overwhelming amount of units, the super battery is just really, really strong. Here, I think if I pushed right away, there is a small chance I could have broken him. I guess there's 6 Phoenixes, I believe. 5 or 6 Phoenixes and an Immortal. Usually you want to have at least 3 siege tanks. So you can out DPS a super battery, especially when it comes to Immortals and Colossus, because they have a more or a higher shield count, I should say. But if he then lifts the tanks or lifts a bunch of Marines and stuff, I just wasn't quite sure if we could get it done. So I decided to play like this, get a bunch of turrets out. And turrets are so... I recently did a test, actually, testing turrets against cannons, against spore crawlers. And missile turrets have so much freaking damage. Like, it's actually insane. So these are so good against Phoenixes. He can basically never get out of this. So I thought we can just contain him forever, get a really good macro position, and then we will take it from there. Now, even if you look at the game right now, we are probably slightly behind in tech compared to the Colossus that our opponent undoubtedly already has at this point, and a bunch of Phoenixes. And we also don't have a third base yet, and right now the Phoenixes are killing my SCVs. If you were wondering why earlier I sent those Reapers into the main, is because the Phoenixes, I thought they were going to go across earlier. And it seemed like they were somewhere, but he just brought them back. I'm going to be able to get this in because the Phoenixes are across, get a couple Zealots, get a couple Probes. And this is basically just payback for him sending his Phoenixes across the map. Because without the Phoenixes, keep in mind, if you play Phoenix, you're not going to have Blink. He can't really catch his medevac with Blinkless Stalker. So this is the kind of stuff you want to do. So I'm going to go up to 5 barracks. The reason why I'm making the wall, by the way, the depots, is so the Disruptors cannot reach the tanks easily. Because otherwise, the Disruptors would kill these tanks pretty fast. If you use Disruptors perfectly, just a cool stat for you guys to know, it has, I believe, either 1 or a half more range than a siege tank. So you can actually kill siege tanks without taking any damage. Admittedly, it can be pretty hard. Like, I've seen a decent amount of Protoss players fail to do that. So sometimes they, exactly like here, that Disruptor, oh, it actually didn't die surprisingly, but it did get hit. And now he's going to show up with Tempest. This really surprised me, to be honest. What I expected to happen here was him to make a Twilight Council, skip Blink to go straight into charge and try to break it. But he went for Tempest, which is pretty cool, honestly. Like, I know we're playing against the really good Protoss players, and really good players are obviously good at finding creative solutions, but this was not something that I expected, but respect, because it's completely different, and it was actually very, very cool. As you can see someone in chat say that Tempest is a big brain move. It actually was, because with the Phoenixes and with the Colossus, I don't think he was going to break this. Keep in mind something you might have forgotten, is that turrets also shoot against Colossus because they're tall enough to be considered an air unit, or whatever you want to call it. It's like a giraffe, right? So it's very, very tall. So a missile turret can actually shoot it. So breaking this with Phoenix and Colossus would be a pretty monumental task. What I'm trying to do is just to buy as much time as possible. Here it looks like I'm going to get at least 1 Phoenix. Might get another one. There we go. 2 Phoenix down. That is really, really good for the Vikings. And we're still buying time. Like, our third base has been up. And unlike Terran, Protoss cannot simply make their Nexus in their natural and lift it over, which means that he's going to have to build that Nexus from now on, which is going to take a while. Now, the thing that I was the most scared of here is that my opponent's tech is pretty insane. First of all, the Disruptors, they are a pretty big supply gap negator. That's the best way I can put it, right? Like, you can be up a lot of supply, but if they're Disruptors, you might not be able to, push into them. And if you do, you might take a really big hit to the face and lose 30 supply. So that's scary. And the Tempest means that he clearly already has a fleet peak, which could mean carriers are on the way too. So this is a game where I have more money. I obviously have more supply at this point. I would guess that he is probably at, I don't know, 135, 140, something like that, right? But he's making a lot of static defenses. He's making the third base now, and he has a really good amount of tech units. So here, my plan was to go for a big push. I believe I'm making Ghost already. I'm making a lot of Vikings. I'm waiting for a couple Ghosts, and then I'm going to go for a pretty killer attack. I'm not even sure if I started my 2-2 at this point. It looks like I haven't started them yet. Like, I really was focused on going for this big attack. Here I was just scanning for an Observer. I actually saw an Observer before a very long time ago when I pushed with my tank push for the first time. before I even set up the contain, I already saw an observer. So I know he's had an observer a very long time, but it could just still be in his base, of course. Now, let's see what we're going to go up against here. It's 11 minutes in the game, but his economy was halted significantly. So he has both Tempest and Carriers, and he also has shield batteries and cannons here. That shield battery is going to be doing a lot of work, but this is... opposed to earlier, now I actually do have a pretty freaking critical army count, right? Like, this is a pretty massive army. I have a lot of units here just to make sure to dodge the disruptors, but that is actually one of the rare strengths I have in PvP. I'm clicking the Marauders forward so they can kill the disruptors and the Colossus under the carriers, and it looks like we're gonna break it because there's no interceptors left, and that is game number 1. Game number 2 is going to be on Alcyone. Now, I was honestly very proud of that first game. That first game, I made adaptations that I haven't even made in a ladder game or a practice game yet. So normally, you kind of... I feel like pro players, when they're at their best, they have their adaptations pretty much ready, right? Like, if you look at like Maru or Serral, for example, the current 2 best players, they know what to do in pretty much every situation. They'll see something and they know they're gonna have to do this. But last game, the contain part, and especially, that was not something I had planned. That was really just an adaptation on the fly, and it was the perfect one. Like, I really won because of that contain idea. Now, of course, the damage we did with the Reaper jump-ups with the Cyclone initially and then later with the tanks was awesome. But I was really proud that I made such a good adaptation. I feel like normally when you're quite nervous, and I do really get nervous in these tournaments. I'm a very nervous type of guy whenever I play these matches, making it hard for me. It's hard to make the right decisions, you know? Like, you feel a little more... I think everyone who's played competitions, and especially if you're a nervous kind of guy, you know the feeling. Like, you get like a little more rigid. You don't necessarily make the right decisions anymore. You always look back at your matches and be like, what the hell was I thinking? Like, why did I even do that, you know? So games like the last one, they actually make me feel quite proud. I know I'm not active as a pro anymore, but just beating a 6.4, 6.5k Protoss player like that, that is definitely something we can be proud of. Now, sadly, this game we did get probe scouted, so I'm not going to be able to go for my beloved reactor first. But I think that's all right. I feel like if I would get too repetitive with my moves, that is also not a great thing, right? So that's fine. And to be honest, one thing that's easy to forget is that... think about it this way, right? If you have the advantage of the reactor first, it's easy to think that you should just play reactor first every single game because you have a certain advantage, making it better, giving you this timing push. But every build kind of has its own advantage. Like now, I have a Reaper out early, which I can actually scout with around my map. If I was going to play against the Proxy Gate, which is a build Strange actually does, by the way, that's why I was scouting around my base here, then this might actually be a little better because then I can react in time, I can make my commands on the high ground potentially, stuff like that, right? So every build has its own advantage, so even if I have to kind of move away from my preferred choice of the reactor first, this is really not that bad. And now I'm basically going to be able to do the same build, but with 2 Reapers instead, which might even mind game my opponent a little bit. Like, he might expect the same, but then if you think about it, I would have spent 100 resources less in Reapers, right? Like, all of a sudden I have that money to, I don't know, get my tank a little faster or whatever, right? So I think it's easy to dwell on not being able to do your favorite build because the map is not right or whatever, but every build really has its own advantage, and there's a reason the builds exist. I think if you play a lot of TVT, Terran versus Terran, you will learn this pretty fast as well, that sometimes a build looks really strong, but every build has their counter, and even if some builds just look stronger than others, they really still have their own advantages. And a big example is actually going for a fast reactor versus not going for a fast reactor. Like, if you want to go for a big Reaper attack, then you would go reactor first, but then you don't have Reapers early, so you might die to 2 fast Reapers yourself. Now here we see he's going to go for a Robo first. I already recognize the building from the shape there. And yes, that is actually something you can do. It's... I feel like that is something that's a little mind-blowing to a lot of people when they find out you can do that. The problem is that I haven't actually studied it. I think if you study it, you can see exactly what building it is by knowing, I believe it is where the shadow is or how far the building is above the health bar, stuff like that. But you can actually recognize the building from the shape. Like you can see whether it's a Stargated Robo or a Twilight Council just by what it looks like. So there I click on it. You should always still click on it to be safe, because sometimes I do get it wrong in, you know, the rush or whatever. Like I can't always get it right. So you should always click. But you can actually see what it is just by the shape. Now, this game, I'm not playing against a Stargate, so I'm actually going to go for that build that I described in the last game, which is the fast third command center. Now, you still get a pretty strong army with this build, so I might still try to do a push, but even in that case, it might be a little bit of a fake. Now, I believe my opponent already scouted me with a hallucinated Phoenix earlier. Or maybe he's still going to do that. I feel like he does really like to do that, and he does it consistently. So it could be that I'm just imagining, you know, whatever happened in the last game. But I feel like he already scouted me with a hallucinated Phoenix. So he might be aware that, you know, I don't have the third barracks, and I'm not going to go for the same attack. You can see he is making a third base. I have to say, I was a little surprised by the timings of his third bases. Not because they're weird, but because they're unusual for him in particular. If you guys have played against Strange before or seen him play TVP before, you would know that he is one of those players that has his completely own style. Like, he doesn't follow the meta at all. He's been playing Robo forever. Right now, Robo is actually a bit more popular, but at some point, no one freaking played Robo, and he was still playing Robo. And he also really likes to play double forge on 2-base. And that timing freaking scares the hell out of me, by the way. Like, that is actually so freaking strong. If you guys have never played against that, it might sound a little silly, but trust me, it is really strong. What he does is he goes for a fast double forge, gets Colossus, and then he gets like a maxed 3-3 Protoss army so fast, and he will just A-move you through your defenses, and you're going to be, I guess, unnecessarily confident because you're like, okay, well, that army doesn't look that big. And then you get absolutely wiped off the map because you have 3-3. It's kind of hard to play against him when you're not used to playing against that stuff at all. So I was kind of surprised to see him not doing that, though he's still using a little bit of his usual playstyle by going for Robo and Forge. As you can see, my Reapers jumped in. He was already having a Forge spinning with an upgrade. So he definitely is still sticking through to that at least a little bit, but it is still a little different. I guess it is actually pretty cool to see, to be honest. Like, if you guys have followed my own evolution, especially throughout my meme builds and stuff, you always see how I get like a little bit better and I sharpen the details just a little bit every time. And that's basically what he's doing as well. Like, he invented his own style, and even now, he's been playing it for a very long time, by the way, but even now he's still sharpening it. So that's really cool to see. I guess that's kind of, yeah, pretty similar to how I play, to be honest. Now, I'm still quite sure that no matter what, he is going to play Colossus. I'm not quite sure I have seen the Colossus already, but it is just, I mean, both to me watching this game and playing the game live, it's incredibly obvious that he's going to go for Colossus because he made a really fast Robo. He's getting the upgrades fast. I mean, I guess he could technically go for like Zealot Immortal or something, but that would just be very weird and very off-brand. The one thing I haven't seen is actually the gas count. For my POV, he only has 2 gases, so I guess theoretically it could be non-Colossus. But realistically, I actually can't imagine it being anything else than Colossus. So there we go. Now I'm going up to 5 barracks. I think my 1-1 should be pretty close to finishing now as well. Now, I've been trying to play a style that I saw Maru play against, I believe it was against Creator in the GSL, where he actually played, it sounds kind of funny that I'm copying him, because he played very similar to how I played TVP before I retired from, you know, official pro play, which was that he would stay on a very low SCV count and just make a really big army. Like against Creator, that's a really good force shield, by the way, by the opponent. That actually cost me, I don't know, like 6 Marines or 7 Marines, 8 Marines, I don't know. It cost me a lot, so that was really well done. But against Creator, he played 65 SCVs only. I think a lot of Terrans these days, they'll play 80, 85. Recently, I remember that Clem shared a secret with me that he should never go above 75 SCVs because your army is bigger. And then I see Maru play with 65 SCVs. So that is a style that, you know, I guess it's kind of close enough to how I used to play that I wanted to try and copy it. I'm still not 100% comfortable with it because I'm not as good with mostly around the time when you get like maxed out and you have to play against disruptors. I feel like that is an incredibly difficult point in the game for Terran because you don't have Liberators yet. You don't have Planetaries everywhere yet. So it feels like you always need to be in position and look everywhere because else you're either going to lose a lot of units to Disruptors or you're going to be stuck in the back of your base against Disruptors. Now, this was a very funny moment because, first of all, you would think that this looks bad for me because he's attacking me while 4 medevacs are out. But realistically, I had all the units that I wanted there, right? Like, I had the tanks, I had the Vikings, I had the Widowmines, so the trade there was actually quite nice. And I didn't, you might not have realized, but I didn't lose those SCVs that I sent back to the main base. So we're going to be able to kill the Forge. I'm going to get a couple Zealots as well. I think we're going to get 4 Zealots there. You might not see it, but looking at it now, actually maybe even more. I think maybe I even killed 6 Zealots, and the Medevacs are all going to escape, besides those 2 Widowmines and potentially a Marine. So I think that was actually a pretty good trade. I mean, I'm still at 161 supply. I have 2 at least I hope so, about to be finished. So that was all pretty nice for me. I think, judging by what his army looked like, I would really need Ghost. I'm not quite sure if I got around to making Ghosts yet. I probably should. Now here I heard the Warp Prism unsiege. Kind of funny. I could have killed it all the time. I didn't actually realize it was there for now. We have a couple too many workers on gas. I'm going to fix that now. Now, this is a little bit of an awkward moment in the game because I kind of talked about it a bit before, I think in the last game, right? Where sometimes something just gets you out of the flow and it becomes a little bit weird to play. This is kind of the same thing because my opponent is on 4 bases already, but I killed his Forge and then he kind of ruined my economy for a bit. So it looks like he's going to go for a big A move. I have a really good concave here, but he's going to do a good job kiting back. And this is a really annoying positioning on the map where he can just kind of go back on top of the ramp and force me to clump up. I went back with my army and still got a really nice concave, but I am kind of running out of units. And the Zealot Warpins are always going to be freaking brutal here. As you can see, those Zealots are absolutely annihilating my SCVs on the right side. I also landed my Vikings just for a Colossus to show up after. And it looks like we are gonna get broken here. And this was honestly a bit of a demoralizing loss because I didn't feel like I did that much wrong. Looking back at it, I know that I took the fight in a wrong way. I should have chased even less and actually hit behind my command center, but I thought I was doing well. So this was a painful loss. You can also see he still has 1,700 minerals, but it's now 1-1 in his best of 3. Final match coming up. Game number 3 is going to be on Ghost River. Now, I can tell you guys that this is going to be one of the matches of the tournament. Whether that's good or bad for us, you have to find out, but I can guarantee you that it is a banger. Now, I have to admit, guys, after the last game, I was out of it a little bit. Like, that loss hit me a little hard because that was my standard macro build that I did, you know? That was the build on which I thought if I'm going to have a good chance in the macro games, that's going to be it. Now, I know that I made a blunder in the fight. I also had a couple of small things go wrong for me, but at the time, it's all very emotional and stuff. That's just kind of how it goes. I just wasn't feeling it 100%, and I was really struggling coming up with a build. You might have noticed someone in chat type, just let your hands decide what to do, because I told them I cannot think of a build right now. Like, I don't know what I could do to win here. So I decided to actually go with my instincts, and that is to go for a Proxy Reaper. The reason why I like Proxy Reaper is because it's... You know, it's an aggressive build. I talked about it before in this video where aggressive builds allow you to get a lot of scouting done. You can kind of skill check your opponent. It's all very nice. But at the same time, it's not crazy committed. Like, it's not like you need to do an insane amount of damage. You need to do some damage, but you don't need to do an insane amount of damage. So that's why I like it. Now, Ghost River was actually a map that I was considering to veto against Strange. And this wouldn't have been a veto against Protoss, but very specifically against Strange, because Strange likes to hit those hard timings like you see in the last game. And on this map, I think it's actually very hard to defend those, because the third base is completely open. This move is actually pretty cool, by the way. Like, I checked for his probe, while barely trying to stay on the edge of vision, so he might not realize. I wanted to sneak behind his mineral line and build a bunker. So I'm going to do that now, but he sees my SCV, unfortunately, so I'm going to have to build it here. I do think this is a really good position for a bunker. One thing that sucks, and one thing that I want to warn you guys against, is that this was nerfed pretty significantly because they just buffed the probe attack range. I don't really remember why they did that, but probes can now pretty easily hit your SCVs in the bunker. But I'm going to still get a couple probes for this, so that is in the end quite nice. Now, this bunker is most likely not going to go up. I already knew this, honestly, in advance. Here, I made a pretty crucial mistake. I wonder if you guys can realize exactly what the mistake is that I made. The mistake was that I wanted to distract his Stalker from being able to kill the bunker, so my second Reaper could get into the bunker, but it was obviously not going to finish. So the bunker is going to have to be cancelled. I was kind of hoping by not cancelling the bunker right away, he would let the battery finish. Here I was trolling my chat a little bit. I obviously wasn't going to GG there, but you can tell the response in the chat in a little bit. I just wanted to have some fun and troll him a little bit. I obviously wasn't dead here by any means. Keep in mind that he probably did finish the battery, he delayed his tech, and we killed 2 probes. So like I mentioned before, you don't need to do a crazy amount of damage. And that's pretty much what happened. We didn't do a crazy amount of damage, but we did a little bit. We get to scout the Robo. And this was actually pretty good for us, is that he went for another battery in the main base. And that is what I really like to see. I feel like Strange, sometimes he plays a little bit too safe, which is really good if you're actually going to play aggressive, right? Like, if you're going to play aggressive against Strange, you need to keep in mind that he's probably going to have a shield battery in each base, and your aggression is not really going to do damage, unless it is very good probe killing stuff, like perhaps a Widowmine drop, or I guess maybe a Hellion drop could work as well. One reason why I don't like Hellion drops is because SimCity is really good against them. So if you look at the minimap, you might have seen it when I was in his base. He has the left side of his base walled off. So if you're going to make Hellions, you already have to go through the middle/right side of the base to get into the mineral line. Now, this is something that I'm doing completely, how do you say this? This was just completely instinct. I have never done this build before in my life. I opened with 2 Cyclones. I realized because it was a Robo that I was not going to be able to do any damage with multiple Cyclones, so I just decided to go for Hellions. Now, I saw an Observer earlier, so here I'm looking for it, and here I actually find it. This I actually was pretty proud of, because it's pretty hard to see Observers, and in particular, I'm not that great at it, but I saw it in advance, and there I was able to snipe the Observer, which is super, super important, because that means that he didn't see my Hellions coming. That is actually a massive deal. So what I'm going to do here is I have the Reaper. If he has a unit blocking the path, I can use the Reaper grenade to knock them out of the way, and then I can have them distract with my Cyclones. So he's going to use Force Field to not let my Cyclones go in, but that means that my Hellions can get into the base, and I should be able to get a couple probes. I think I killed 3, not 100% sure. There was another one dying. These Cyclones actually get another couple probes as well, and in the end, we are doing a little bit of damage. We did use, I believe, 500 resources for that, right? Like, we lost 4 Hellions, which is 400, and 1 Reaper, making it 500. But we did do a little bit of damage, and we're getting him out of his mojo. Now, especially playing against someone who really likes to play on 2 bases for a long time, that is a pretty decent, you know, part of his economy there. Now, like the guy in chat said, I'm playing my heart out. I really was trying my best. I feel like a lot of the time, I said it before, I'm going to say it again, a lot of time I can be a bit demotivated when my starts are not that good. Like, I'm not necessarily the most confident player ever, so when I get a rough start against a good opponent, I can feel quite bad about it. But here, I was really fueled by everyone watching and typing in the chat and supporting me and stuff, even having a little bit of fun there with the fake GG and the fake XD that I typed in the first series. So I actually was playing my heart out. I really was trying my freaking best throughout this entire series. Now, it is a little bit of an awkward situation because my opponent's playing Robo, and I am still on 2 bases, and you shouldn't really be able to do a lot of damage against someone playing I guess Colossus really fast, right? If you're gonna play against Colossus, you can do drops, you can do stuff with Liberators, but it's gonna be a little hard. There I got owned by the pathing a little bit. I saw where I was clicking my Cyclones, and I thought it was good enough. Sadly, one of them was still in range. Now, if you're wondering why I didn't use that Liberator earlier and I just siege it in the corner, it's because, first of all, he's never going to have anti-air, he's never going to have an air unit anti-air because he was playing Robo. If anything, he's going to add a Twilight, not a Stargate. And I had to fly over so many buildings, first the pylon in the bottom of his base, then all of his buildings, that I mean, I wasn't going to disrespect him that much to still siege in his base and somehow imagine he didn't already send 2 Stalkers, but losing that Liberator would have been annoying, so I decided to just keep it in the corner for a rainy day. Like, at some point, it might actually pay off and be the perfect distraction that I need, right? Now, this was another YOLO decision. I really felt like I had to do something more here. Catching this Hallucinated Phoenix, super nice, by the way. So I actually went for 5 barracks before going up to 2 bases. Now, sadly for me, his second Observer did see my units. Now, here I might get... There we go. Oh, really nice shot on those Colossus there. But I decided to go for no Medivacs, go for Viking straight up, and just do a push. Because his kind of play he's not gonna have the tech very fast at all. Like, he's not gonna have the fast charge or blink or stuff like that. He's not gonna have the air unit, so maybe I can actually do something with these. Now, there, my Liberator killed a Stalker. I am pretty sure... Wait... Oh, no, I actually F2'd there. Oh, that's so unfortunate. That's why I always siege it in the dead space. I didn't actually get to do it yet, unfortunately. But I was pretty sure he had a battery there. That's why I unsieged it, but I just didn't siege it again in time. And now I'm going to go for a very risky move that could pay off very well. All of his Colossus are stuck there. I know he doesn't have good tech like charge and blink and stuff, so I decided to just send all of my Marines there and leave all of my good Colossus units back over here. Now, he does have a couple of Immortals, sadly, but I think my units are trading very efficiently here. These Vikings are also going to do quite well. I'm going to kill the Stalkers. Ideally, I save those Marauders, but it kind of depends on what I'm going to trade them for exactly. I'm going to bring them back now. And in the meantime, I think we're going to kill maybe like 25 probes or so. Admittedly, I would say this feels like a little more damage than it actually is, because keep in mind, I never made a third command center, guys. I'm on a 2-base economy, and now my opponent is also on a 2-base economy pretty much, but he does still have the third base, and with Chrono Boost, he's gonna get those probes back very fast. So in the end, I would say it was a good move, but I definitely don't think it's a game-winning move by any means. I would say that now we are either even or slightly behind. So that is still going to be very, very tough. The good news is that I do have a good amount of tech units, right? Like, I still have 2 siege tanks because I kept making them. I have 4 Vikings already. And normally, especially against these timing attack kind of players with the Colossus, you might get hit at a timing where you don't have tanks for the defense. You don't have enough Vikings for the Colossus, and you might not even have Ghosts and stuff. But Vikings are really expensive, and the fact that I already have 4 of them could prove very good for the future, right? Now, I'm even hunting a little bit here. I just want to say in advance, if you're ever going to do this move, please be freaking careful, okay? Because, like, if he has Blink Stalkers or Phoenixes or something like that, these are just dead. I knew he probably wasn't going to have Blink. I was going to guess that he would go for Charge first. Not 100% sure, actually, but I guess he was going to go for Charge first. And that's why I was moving around with these a little bit. Maybe I can catch some Colossus off guard or something. Didn't find anything, but we did see that the 4th base is not that fast. Now, I do have to explain something about the ratio of economy here. I see someone in the chat type, what was it? The messages go pretty fast. It was, he's taking a 4th base after that. Oh my god. But Protoss is actually supposed to be ahead in bases against Terran. The fact that he doesn't have the 4th base yet made me a little more confident in this game. Like, I wouldn't say that we're ahead, but I was, like, it always happens when you're playing against Protoss. Like, sometimes the best way I can explain it is that you're just always afraid that you're behind, right? Because sometimes you just don't read the game state entirely well, and without knowing it, you're all of a sudden just in a massive amount of trouble. So seeing that the 4th base wasn't there made me believe that I wasn't in a massive amount of trouble. Not necessarily that I'm winning, but I wasn't in a massive amount of trouble, so that is quite nice. I'm gonna have 4 tanks now. I think I'm building Ghost already, and it looks like he was gonna go for an attack. I have a really good position here, by the way. I targeted my tanks on the Stalker, so these Vikings are going to survive for longer. And this looks like a pretty decent attack. Sadly, I am running out of Vikings. There were also a couple Stalkers from the back, but we are going to clean up most of this. But now, he's already going to get a couple more Zealots in. These fights are so hard, because there's always going to be a couple Zealots warping in, and you're not going to be able to get on top of the Colossus. This is a very tough fight. These are 2 Colossus fighting here. This looks very, very questionable. At this point, I started wondering if I had made a mistake. The Viking is targeted on the Prism, so the Prism is going to die. Means the Colossus is also going to die. I have a tank sieging up here. That tank is going to get a massive shot off before the blink, and this Marauder is going to be able to kill 4 Stalkers on his own, and we're going to be able to kill the Colossus as well with another Viking shot, and there we go. And after all that, we are left with 87 supply, 12 minutes into the game. And once again, I have absolutely no freaking idea what the state of this game is, right? Because I barely have SCVs. If you look at what I have, I think, what do I have? 45 SCVs or maybe 50 at most? I actually have no idea. I was also intending to go for a kind of 1-1 all-in with Ghosts. And now I guess that plan is kind of out of the window. Like, the thing with Terran to always remember is that Terrans work best when you have your army composition properly molded. So if you have all your Vikings, you have enough medevacs, you have enough Ghosts, enough Widowmines, then you can attack, but you can't really attack with scraps. I think other races are a little bit better at that. Like sometimes you'll see Zerg just flood 70 links from the reinforcement with 10 Hydras, and then they'll attack with that, and that's fine. With Terran, you could never attack with something like that, for example. Like, you'd absolutely never attack, so I figured I had to go for the upgrade. So instead of going for the 1-1 all-in, I decided to add the second engineering bay and the armory, so I could actually go for that, while in the meantime trying to get the best army up possible. Now, sadly for me, that probe saw my drop. I really wanted to try and get a lot of workers at the third base, but that was not going to happen. Now, this was another little piece of big intel. Not quite... Little piece of big intel sounds quite funny. Not quite sure if you guys picked up on it, but he doesn't have gases yet on the third, which means that he's most likely still... Actually, Dolan is an NA Pro Terran player. He also mentioned it in the chat. There's no gas on the third, which means he's most likely still planning to attack me. And even if he isn't, that means his army is going to be very zealot-based. And against zealot-based playstyles, you want to be a little more passive. If you're out on the map, it's way more likely that your Protoss is going to take a good fight there than if it's in your base. Because zealots are just so good at getting a surround. You can kite zealots, but it's honestly not super efficient. Like, you really want to make sure that your army is in a hard spot to surround. Ideally, you have a couple of Widow Mines, and that way you can take a decent fight. Also, if Protoss player plays low gas mass zealot, like, keep in mind, I'm sitting on only 3 bases with a rather mined out main and natural. And he's going to be maxed out way before me, right? On cheap units, he's not mining as much gas, so his mineral income is way higher. So you have to be very, very careful here. Now, with that scan, I actually saw the Observer, which is quite nice. I might be able to kill that at some point, even though scanning is quite expensive now. Keep in mind, every time you scan, you don't drop a meal, which could cost you about 200 minerals per meal. I don't know exactly what it is. I feel like sometimes they patched it, and mules mine more and less and better on these patches, blah, blah, blah. I think it's about 200 minerals you miss for every scan. So if you're going to scan, you better make it a smart scan where you either need to see the Protoss player's position or you're going to kill an Observer. And even then, it might sometimes be questionable. Now, I'm going to scan here just because I wanted to see the upgrades. Like, I wanted to see exactly what we were working with. So I think this is 2-2 against 2-1, or it looks like our 2-2 is about to finish. That could... I mean, it's 15 minutes in the game. You would say that it has to be 3-3, but I know it's not, because that last attack finished at 12 minutes, I remember. Now, I noticed that this... Nexus did not have a recall, which is nice. I'm going to EMP it anyway, because why not? I'm going to make sure to kill the pylon. And this is just a little bit of really nice damage to do, you know? Like, this is not really a big deal, but I could tell that his army went all the way back home to deal with this. And that is always quite nice to see. So now, that also allows us to get this 4th base up. Getting a 4th base up against Protoss is one of the most difficult things, because that is the point where Protoss tends to be maxed, and you're not maxed. And it's also a lot of zealots, which means, you know, you're going to have to go in the open one more time. Now, what's really hard about these games in particular is when you're poor, you don't really have the infrastructure to defend against all kind of stuff. Like, my natural is completely exposed to a War Prism. War Prism could fly into the natural at any point, and it would be incredibly hard for me to deal with. Now, I decided that because this economy is so large, I was maxed. I got 2-2, which could either be 1 upgrade ahead or behind, depending on if it's 3-2 finished or not. I don't even know if he's double forge. So I decided I have to go for it. And this War Prism, keep in mind, I am maxed. I can't make any units on the reinforcement. So actually, this is actually pretty nice that I lost a couple of units here, because that means I can now make stuff at home, which is really not that bad. Also losing a bunch of SCVs, of course. But I still decided that I had to go for this no matter what. I do have a lot of Widow Mines in a good position. This Pro Pool made me realize that he also has the 6th base, by the way. Because he already saturated the 5th base, which means that he also has a 6th base. He walked into all the Widow Mines. I'm going to get really big EMPs off. Sadly, I could barely not get that pylon in time for the entire Zealot Warpin on the left side, but it was still pretty good. All the Colossus are going to fall. The hardest part about having this army right now is that I have all these Vikings. And Vikings are honestly incredibly bad against stuff like Zealots, Immortals, Disruptors, pretty much anything besides Colossus, and in some situations Stalkers. So I have 128 supply, but if you look at how low HP it is, and considering the amount of Vikings I have, I wasn't necessarily thrilled with this army. Now we're finally going to be able to clean up the Warpin into my main. And now exactly... Oh, the 6th base wasn't finished yet. I didn't remember that, but I also assumed in the game, I'm pretty sure that it was finished. So it's really nice that it wasn't. That means his economy wasn't as good all this time as I had expected. So now I'm going to kill... I killed 2 bases already worth of probes. That's probably going to be... Well, the 3rd base might be half mined out. So maybe like 30 probes already. I'm going to siege a Liberator in that base. I'm going to go for the EMP on the battery and the Nexus. That's a really good habit to have, by the way, because that means that they can't recall to it. Now, sadly, I'm going to have to sacrifice some units here. His army was getting a little bit too big. Like, I know you would think Zealots are low tech and you can deal with that. I can guarantee you my army would have gotten absolutely crushed like an ant if I fought there. Now, what sucks for me is that I kind of thought he wouldn't have as much stuff. So seeing all of those Zealots kind of hurt a little bit. Now, that Liberator, I'm looking at it from the minimap. I think that actually killed another 6 probes, which is really massive. Now, this is a really cool move here. I decided to drop into the main base so it would be distracted and then land the Vikings into that 6 base. It really sucked for me that he reacted because I would have loved to see all of those Vikings absolutely shred a freaking probe line, because they do. Probes are mechanical, so they die really fast. Now, these units would have died pretty easily to any kind of decent Zealot plus Stalker count. So I decided to evacuate, and hopefully we're going to be able to save a couple of these. Now, looking at the army back home, it really doesn't look very promising, mostly because it's very marine heavy. You don't really want your army to be that marine heavy. We could lose 2 medevacs here, but we're only going to lose 1. So we're going to lose about 10 supply there, but we're going to be able to save the rest. And this entire sequence was so freaking cool. Like, I harassed him everywhere. 2 of my medevacs are going to come back home from the top, and my Vikings are going to come back home from the bottom. Means we actually have a pretty well-rounded composition again. We have the Vikings against the Colossus, and we have a bunch more units to help us deal with the Zealots. Now, at some point, someone in chat wrote, the Marine info is really clutch, and I agree. Like, sending out these single Marines, seeing where the army is at all times, has been incredibly useful. Like, it's been super useful for me knowing where I have to send my army, being able to be in position, even knowing, like, when he's transferring probes and stuff like that. So now I can see his army is still at home, and this is the first point in the game where I was actually feeling a little confident, because his army looked small. For the first time this game, I felt like his army actually looked a little small, and that makes sense, because I've killed a lot of workers all this time. And now that Zealot made me wonder if he didn't even realize I had a 4th base all this time, because he sent the Zealot over there to check. That is just my 4th base. He was on 6, and maybe he didn't realize that I had the 4th all this time. Now, this is going to be a very interesting fight. I want to siege my tank a little lower, and this is going to bait him in. I'm going to get perfect EMPs here, and this fight is super nice because the Marines are in the back. The Marines are not being damaged by either the Colossus or the Zealots. I'm going to be able to kite. Everything was EMP'd. He blinked the Stalkers forward, and we are going to take an absolutely massive fight here, which is really, really awesome. Even this fight alone, I was already so proud, because this game has been so freaking difficult for me. You can tell the chat is already getting quite hyped as well. Now, I don't think we've completely done it yet. The opponent's going to go for a base trade. I decided to be smart and not give in to the chaos. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to drop into his last properly remaining mining base and then go back with the rest. Now, I'm going to be able to kill that pylon powering the battery. So the battery is not going to be able to heal in the bottom left, and the Zealots are going to die. Half the Warpin also failed. I have a lot of army at home, so we're going to be able to shave off a bunch of those Stalkers. Also have this random Marauder slowing them, which is really nice. Now, this economy is going to die. I do have these medevacs. They stayed around to heal 1 Marauder, so I'm going to lose 3 of them. That's a little painful, because that's 300 gas that I don't have that I'm going to have to rebuild that with. But at this point, he doesn't really have an economy. I'm going to close the depot, so he can't get away with that. The Prism is going to be too late to pick them up, and we have freaking done it. And this was so epic. I remember actually shouting out loud, whoo! Like, that was so cool. You can tell the chat is going ham as well. I was insanely proud of this. We move on to round number 3. And our top 16 match is going to be against Lambo, our toughest opponent yet. Lambo was the #1 seed in this qualifier. He had the most EPT points out of all the contestants. His MMR is about 6,700. I think his highest is about 6,900. Though he doesn't really seem like a frequent ladder player. He's a bit more of a custom grind god, so I don't know what his actual skill level is. But alright, his MMR is 6,700, and he is currently ranked number 3 Zerg in Europe, after obviously Serral, the best player in the world, and Raynor as well. So honestly, I didn't know how this match was gonna go at all, because I have played some super competitive games against Serral, for example, even won some. And at the same time, I did feel like I was losing my mojo a little bit when it comes to TVZ. So I came back to practicing a little bit, right? I've been playing for like a couple weeks. And I was doing super well with the 2-Rax Reaper opening. 2-Rax Reaper opening is an opening that especially the Korean Terrans really liked, but even when I was a pro, I never really liked playing that build. For some reason, it just wasn't really my jam. But then I came back, I started playing 2-Rax Reaper, and it felt stronger than all the other builds. So I also gave some really good games against Cero with that. In fact, the game that I won that I made a video about recently was also with a 2-Rax Reaper opening. Albeit I don't think... Wait, was it actually 2-Rax? No, it wasn't a 2-Rax Reaper opening. No, it wasn't. No, I remember some other game that I played against Cero where it was like super good close games. And there I actually did play 2-Rax Reaper. So it's definitely a build that I was pretty good with. But for some reason, the last couple TVZs I played on ladder, I did win most of them. But it also didn't feel like it was super convincing anymore. I was trying a couple different versions. Now on this map, I actually had a pretty cool idea. So you're gonna see this come to fruition a lot later, but on this map, I felt like if you spread your units well, and if you even make some buildings in some very special places, you can get vision of the entire map pretty easily and be pretty strong against Zergling run-bys, and just go for a big tank push through the middle. Normally, you can't really do big tank pushes through the middle that easily because you're going to get either 100 Zerglings in your base or you're going to get Omega flanked. But on this map, I actually think you can manipulate the map well enough that you really get a straight path where you can't be flanked on. So that was going to be my plan for game number 1 here on Alcyone. Now, 2-Rax Reaper, it's not necessarily a super committal build. I'm still going to go for a faster command center. You can actually switch it up a little bit and you can play 3-Rax Reaper sometimes. You can play 5 Reapers instead of 3 or 4 instead of 3. You can do a lot of different things. I think this game, I decided to go for 4. My standard is 3, but... Oh, no, I actually did go for 3 in the end. Yeah, exactly. I thought I was going to go for 4, but maybe that was another TVZ that I remembered. But my standard is 3. I kind of thought there would be Zerglings up there. That's why I jumped up so carefully, and maybe we can get one drone here. It would be nice. Looks like his defense is going to be on point. Now, sometimes if you micro the Reapers really well, you can actually get a Queen here. So that was what I was trying to do, but his micro was a little bit too good there. But like I said, I want to be a little careful here because at some point, usually at about 3:30, the extra, or the extra Queens as well, but more importantly, the link speed finishes. And if link speed finishes and you only have 3 Reapers, like if you have 10, sure, right? Like you can stick around, throw some good grenades, make it a micro battle, but with just 3 Reapers, you can't actually really do that much against even like 12 Zerglings with speed, so I decided to be really careful. Now, what is nice for me is that on this map, the middle watchtower area is actually quite nice. Like, you can stay there for a long time, and there's not that many Zerglings that can actually reach there, so that could be a pretty nice place to chill at. So if you look at my Reaper movement, first I was planning to jump into the natural. The natural has a weird angle. It's the way I'm jumping into my natural now, where you can kind of sneak in. They might not expect it. But I kind of thought it would be better if I wait for my Hellions. Because if you group up the Reapers and the Hellions, you actually get a pretty strong force that you can, you know, move out on the map with and deny creep. If you don't have the 3 Reapers, then you basically just have Hellions, but very late. So there's going to be way too many links out, and the Queens are already in front and stuff. So that's going to be a little scary. So this is actually the first part of my plan for map domination, if you will. And that is that I'm going to make a singular Banshee. Now, one thing I didn't check this game, I only just realized now, is where the Overlords are. I know there's one in the middle of the map, kind of towards the left of the Watchtower. I've already seen it multiple times. It's probably... That is one Overlord. I don't think that's the same one. I think there's one still to the left of the Watchtower. We just barely can't see it. But I'm going to make one Banshee. And you're going to see what that Banshee is going to do later on. It's going to be a little easier if it's actually on the map and you can see it with your eyes. But I'm going to keep a Banshee, just a single one on the left side. And that Banshee should be able to see every single run-by coming from that side. So I'm already going to kill 2 Queens here, and that's already very good news for everyone that was a fan of me keeping the Reapers alive instead of YOLOing them for damage, because I am going to kill 2 Queens, and normally you don't, which is going to really slow the creep threat down. And here is the Banshee. This Banshee can see everything by just being on this kind of 3-way point that it is now. Like, there's a bunch of rocks there. You can see it on the minimap that he can kill. If he comes from that path, the Banshee will see it. If units come from the left, the Banshee will see it. So that is just a really nice path. I think you could actually go for 2 Banshees, because there's one more way you can do run-bys on this map, which I also have another creative solution for, but you're going to see that come into play a little later. So you can see, despite my start not being very good with the 2-Rax Reaper, I'm still going to get my 3rd base up at a decent time. I'm still going to get get my upgrades up, and is looking pretty good. Killed a couple queens. There's no creep spread here. I think with that amount of queens, we were never going to be able to deny the creep spread there. 4 queens, obviously pretty good against Reaper Hellion. I don't think he was going to make the mistake again of going off creep. So I just decided to go here and kill a bunch of the creep tumors. Now, this is the exact moment when I realized I made a mistake. You guys might not see it, but on the minimap, there were about 30 lings. He made a lot of zerglings because I think he might have been afraid for an attack. I saw it with the watchtower. There were 30 lings going to wrap around and surround my Hellion, so I kind of had to go forward, and that was, I guess, the first true mistake of the game. I mean, I did kill a decent amount of creep with them. I killed 2 queens as well, but in the end, that was obviously not too meaningful. The best point about this is that he overmade lings and bailings a little bit. Like, I really think he was expecting some kind of hellbat attack. Maybe it's because of my reputation, or maybe it's because, I don't know, he didn't trust what he saw. I'm not quite sure, but he did overmake those units a little bit. So I think that is one nice point for us. Now, the 1-1 and the upgrades in general are a little bit late with this version. And that's a little worrisome, because this build, I tend to call this build the brick, by the way. You might have heard this term before, the brick. I even made a video on it, which is called... it's one of my first videos ever, by the way, like a Terran School episode, like number 5. I think it's called How to Destroy Zergs Consistently. And in the thumbnail, I have a brick on my shoulder. Those were still some really cool, you know, paint art, old thumbnails that I made. And that's because this strategy is called the brick. And the brick in StarCraft is basically used as a term for kind of people that do builds that are just very simple, or just the builds themselves that are very simple. You also have builds that are called brick breakers, which are builds that are basically good against people that are a little bit worse than you. So like certain timing attacks that the top players will always defend, but are very hard to deal with for not even bad players, just players that are slightly worse than you. You can call those brick breakers, right? But this build is called the brick, where you just go for 8 barracks, tanks. It's pretty much just a 3 base all-in where you're not planning to transition. And I'm going to go straight to the middle. Now, this point made me a little sad. I wonder if you guys can realize why. It's because I see the Hydras. And it's not necessarily because the Hydras are so good against what I'm doing, but it's more that the fact that he already has the Hydras out and I'm moving out while only just getting my 1-1. It means that he was definitely significantly ahead at this point already. So you can really tell that my initial builds didn't do that much damage. That was a cool move for my opponent. He didn't want to show the Zerglings so the Bailings could get in uncontested, but I was already ready anyway. So I'm going to siege his tank. In the end, this is still going to be a very potent run-by, because there are literally 2 Bailings that are going to survive, one of them on 1 HP. I think that was about 8 workers going down. Not the biggest deal ever, but still pretty painful, of course. So we have to clean this up. Those Marines are all low HP. They're barely going to be good enough to clean it up. He's going to attack in front here. Those Bailings are not really going to do very much, but he is going to be able to take care of 2 tanks. And this is going to put us in a very tough spot. We have 140 supply. And this is the move I wanted to make earlier that was super, super cool. And I think is really creative. It's basically what he did. That's the one other run-by path this map had. Is he killed the rocks at my gold base and he ran through. This is a move that I was actually expecting, because Zerg players have done this against me before. I wasn't born yesterday, so I figured out you could make a barracks there and block it off. The thing is, I wasn't actually planning on attacking yet. Like, I was planning to just kind of stay in front of his base for a little while and annoy him. And I think for that reason, I didn't really consider the fact that I needed that barracks already. So that run-by really put us in a tough spot here. He's going to attack with everything he has. The Bailings, the splits are really good so far. And I think these Marines are actually barely going to win now. This was quite surprising. This was honestly an amazing fight for what it should have been. And I mostly credit it to the Marine splits there. Like I've said it before, that is one of the things that I can still compete with the best Terrans in the world, and that is the Marine split against Bailings. I think a lot of my other areas of my game are quite lacking, but the Marine splits are definitely still there. Now, sadly for me, this was all not very good, to be honest. Just to be frank with you guys, this was all not very good, mostly because I now don't have the snowball anymore. Like, when you do the brick, you kind of want to keep pushing, keep getting favorable trades because you're in the Zerg's phase, and then eventually you can push through. This is pretty much the opposite of what happened in this game, right? Like, we're still at 150 supply, but our opponent, he could have had 90 drones by now and be absolutely giga rich, and that would be, you know, it would make sense because we just haven't done enough damage. We haven't been in his face enough. Luckily for us, or not luckily, we obviously deserve that with the effort we put, we did deny a lot of creep. So there's actually not that much creep out here, and we can go again. But realistically, it is going to be hard for us to win from here. We have 165 supply, which is really quite impressive. That one tank, I'm not sure if you guys saw it, was actually blocking all of our freaking Marines, by the way. Like, that was actually the dumbest tank I've seen in a while. But now he has Vipers out already, and usually a Zerg getting Vipers out while being maxed is kind of the sign that it is a little too late for the brick, because Vipers are an incredibly good counter to this. He went in surprisingly early, but then he pulled back again. That was a pretty nice move by him, forcing his stim and then pulling back. But the Vipers, they can yoink the tanks. As you can see, I already lost 2 Liberators for free. Their range is too long, so I can't really counter it. If I'm too far forward with the Marines, they die to the Balings and Hydras and stuff. So here we go. I'm going to try to get one Viper, use a Blinding Cloud. He went for the surround. And even though the spread here by me is once again very, very good on all sides, pretty much, those Marines on the top taking a little bit too much damage from the Balings, this is not going to be good enough. And GG has to be called for game number 1. Game number 2 is going to be on Amphion, and it's time to get a little bit crazy. I always like to take a couple minutes in between games just to actually come up with a build order. Like, I'm a player who doesn't remember... this might sound crazy to you guys if you guys have watched more of my stuff. I'm actually not a player that remembers the builds super well. So back in the day when I would go to like tournaments, I would go to a DreamHack, you know, I practice a lot, and I would have 5 builds in every matchup and stuff. Sometimes I would arrive at the tournament and literally don't remember whether my build was like Marine first or Reaper first or stuff like that. I would always forget. It's like I remember the strategy itself more than actually the build order, which I guess it's kind of natural to high-level players, right? But still, it's a little it's a little tough sometimes to not be able to remember the build there. But this game, I decided to get a little crazy. What I decided to do was on this map, there is a very sneaky jump-up spot. That means your Reaper arrives super fast. So what I decided to do was build a second barracks out of vision of the Overlord. Like, this is a little risky where I built it, because an Overlord technically should go directly to my natural and miss this, but it's also pretty close, right? So what I'm going to do is basically get a super fast second Reaper in his base. It's not necessarily about the follow-up. You could see this as a 2-Rex Reaper of some sorts, but the second Reaper arriving super fast is what I want, because then maybe I can get extra damage done on the Queens. Or perhaps kill more drones or stuff like that, right? Like, this really, I have to admit, this was a complete YOLO. I have never done this build before, ever, and I was just gonna go for it and see how it was gonna go, right? So the second barracks is in position. Both Reapers should arrive in the same spot. Now here, I was a little nervous because that SCV, I don't think the Overlord saw it, but I was also not sure, and now I'm going to show it. Actually, he still doesn't see it, which is quite nice. I was like, I'm going to show it anyway because it doesn't matter. At this point, he knows something is missing, so it's, you know, doesn't really matter if he's going to see it now anyway. Like, he knew something was up because he saw the lack of command center. And now the first Reaper is already going to arrive super fast. This is straight up like 10 seconds faster than on normal maps, by the way. Like, the Reaper is so fast on this map, and my second Reaper is already on the way. And this was the point of the build. Now, I already have my natural building as well. So this is not going to be an all-in by any means, but it is going to be a very strong initial aggression. His Queen is about to finish. I am barely not going to be able to kill that drone, unfortunately. That would have been nice. And now, this is actually... I don't think I've ever really had this with any of my Reaper builds, but my Reaper was already there when the Queen spawned. Now, this point is when I have to give you guys a big warning. I'm already going to start my 3rd CC. This map is honestly a massive bait, and I figured that out twice now. I'm going to go up to 5 Reapers, I believe, because that first Reaper jumping spot is really nice. It kind of makes you want to play some kind of Reaper build, but the moment you leave, you actually cannot really attack anymore at all with the Reapers, because here I'm going to have to walk up a ramp, only because I had really good micro. I don't lose a Reaper, but at the same time, I can't really jump up in that super tiny little jump up spot on the left side, because if there's just a couple Zerglings there, they will be able to block it. Now, my follow-up is quite nice. I already have the factory going and my 3rd CC. There are no Zerglings here, to my surprise. Now, honestly, this is exactly when I realized I made the biggest mistake of the tournament. I jumped in. I really didn't think Zergling speed was going to be finished. I really think he would make that many. I thought I was going to survive with a couple, but I lose every single Reaper. And this is, I know, extremely anticlimactic, but mistakes are there to be made. That was my biggest mistake of the entire tournament. It happened so fast. Some people in chat don't even know what happened. They're going to ask in a little bit exactly what happened. And that is going to be the end of my tournament. And to be honest, it was very disappointing, but I did what I had to do. If I look back on it, I realized that both my builders were not that good. I actually looked at the VOD of the first game, and I realized that even when I was pushing, I was already down 45 supply, which you can't really contribute to macro because our macro was fine. It's not like I got out macroed there, but the builder was a little bit too bad. And here, like I said, I really just got baited by the map. I thought it would be really good with the Reapers on this map. I even write it in the chat here, but this kind of owned me, and that's going to be the end of the run. But I do want to say thank you all so much for supporting me, whether you were in Twitch chat or here or both. Obviously, if you're not both, then you wouldn't have heard this if you were only in Twitch chat. But that's going to be it for the run. We had a good run. Hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did enjoy it, give the video a like, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you all for the next one. Peace.